Okay, so welcome to this week's episode of The Path Less Chosen, the podcast showing the careers they don't teach you in school. My name's Sol.
I'm Jamie.
And this week we have on Harry Dyer, who is working as an actor, an absolutely fascinating path less chosen, and it's a beauty of an episode. Jamie, what can our viewers expect from this episode?
Yep, there's a lot to come, and it's a really fascinating industry. I mean, the first big thing that we're going to find out is how 98% of all actors at any one time are unemployed and what it's like to actually survive in that industry. The second one is the thoughts, feelings and emotions that go into the moment you step out to audition for Warhorse, which I imagine is going to be pretty terrifying. And then thirdly, we're going to hear how he went from studying in labs in a science degree to acting as a Komodo dragon with his mate as a monkey and the other mate making eagle noises in the corner, and what the hell created that dynamic. But it's going to be a really interesting one.
Amazing. Yeah, sounds good, mate. Let's get him on. And just before we do, if we could just ask one very quick thing. I know we spam you just before every episode and we really appreciate it. But if you could just drop a follow on our Instagram. If you have already, thank you so much. And we appreciate it. If you haven't, just a quick follow would be really helpful. And it means you can keep up to date with all things Path Less Chosen. Okay, enough of me. Let's get Harry on.
Perfect. Well, Harry, thank you so much for joining us. I think this is a really interesting world that Sol and I don't really know much about and want to find out a little bit more. And I thought one of the most striking things you told us before we joined is that 98% of actors are unemployed at any one time. So I think for anyone listening to that, before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of it, why bother? Why even try?
It's a ridiculous stat, and it was one that I sort of tried to show myself to sort of almost like convince myself that I didn't want to do it, but I still managed to get through. But it's one of those things. I mean, I've done it so much from like young as like 5 years old, really, and it's always been the sort of thing that I sort of came back to. It's, you know, I think during like COVID as well, I had so much time to sort of think about what I actually wanted to do, and it's just I couldn't really get away from it, to be honest. In quite a nice way. So it was something that I always wanted to sort of come back and just explore. Because that stat is a bit daunting, but once you do get there and once you do have that chance to do it, if it's something that you really, really, really enjoy doing, then it's, that's kind of the whole thing, really. For me, it's just sort of, I wanted to give it a proper chance, and it sort of seemed like the right time to do that as well. Sort of coming out of COVID, seemed like a new project for me, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's kind of answer I was hoping for, because ultimately, if you do love it, then it doesn't matter what the stat is, right? You want to give it a good go. So I think that's perfect. And you touched on it there, and I think it's important to kind of set the scene a little bit for anyone listening. You said you've been doing it from as young as 5 years old, and as we touched upon before we began, I had the pleasure of gracing a stage with you once, obviously dressed as a woman with a I can't remember, some crazy scarf around her necks, right, which was fantastic. And I remember you being parts of the productions at school. But tell us a little bit about your background and what you did as a kid that obviously led you to wanting to do this as a career.
I sort of, as I said, I started from the age of 5, being in the nativity shows like everyone is, and then through primary school I'd do at least sort of 2 shows a year, and then it carried on into secondary school. But it wasn't really until I got to uni, I was doing a science degree, so it was something very, very different. But I managed to get into a couple of societies there, so I was part of a theatre group society basically, and so I was in a show in my first year, and then sort of in the summer of my first year I actually went up to Edinburgh Fringe to do a show, like an original show that one of my friends wrote, and we took it up there. And then I think it was sort of when we got to COVID, that was the first time I actually genuinely had the time to think about it, because I think it had always been one of those things that I wanted to do, and it would be nice, but kind of leave it to the pros sort of thing, because I didn't know anyone who was anything to do with the world, and knew anything about it. So it was even when I told my parents that I was thinking about applying for drama school, they were just sort of like, where have you got this from? Have we done this somehow? Because it's not us. They're very sciencey as well. But yeah, so it was COVID, and I had the time to sort of think back over the last couple of years and think with like uni what I'd actually really enjoyed doing, and it wasn't the science degree, it was the acting that I managed to do and the shows that I've been in, and I think especially like taking the show up to Edinburgh Fringe, that was something that it was one of the best things I've ever done, and would say if anyone who's looking at acting, if you can get up there, it's so much fun. It's really good.
It's fascinating. And you went to uni to do a science-related degree. Why? Like, were you thinking that was going to be your life when you stepped onto your first day of uni? And then where did it fall apart?
Yeah, exactly. I think obviously Jamie and I went to the same school, and we'll know that our school pushed a certain type of thing.
Doctors.
Doctors, and coming from a family of doctors as well, that was kind of where I wanted to be a doctor for a little while, then sort of moved away from that, but I always liked like biology and chemistry and the sort of sciences as well. I almost did like drama GCSE, did drama GCSE, almost did drama A level and stuff like that as well. So I had a bit of a crossroads basically. Went down the science route instead, just because it was what I was most interested in, I think. It wasn't necessarily that I saw myself doing a particular job when I went to uni. It was just that I wanted to go to uni, and it was kind of not the obvious choice, but it was something that I knew I did enjoy it at times anyway. So I knew it would be something that I find interesting. It's still something I find really interesting. I knew after the first, probably after my first year, that I wasn't going to be stepping foot in a lab after I finished uni.
And then you've got to a point where you are starting to like it, and I think there's going to be so many people who are listening who maybe have their full-time thing, and myself included, and have something who's like, it's quite a nice thing on the side. When did you go? When was that decision, right? Like, this is a full-time thing that I'm going to go for. I'm going to ditch this kind of what I thought was going to be my path chosen.
I think maybe I'm a slightly different circumstance, because it was COVID really. It was like I had the time to sort of. I was actually looking at applying for other like masters after I graduated and everything, and so I was still at uni when I sort of made that jump, if you know what I mean. So I was had a very busy Christmas when I was revising for exams in my second year exams, but I was also applying for drama school, so I had a lot of work to do that Christmas, and funnily enough, one thing took priority there, and it wasn't my science degree. So I think it was for me. I think maybe I almost had the luxury of having the time to sort of really, really think about it. Which if you're going from something like a full-time job and thinking actually no, maybe it's time to give this a go, that must be a completely different set of challenges to think about it as well. But it's one of those things, and it's obviously a case-by-case basis. But if it is something that if you wanted to do it for ages, and maybe your full-time job isn't quite giving you what you'd hope for, it's a very complicated decision. But for me, it's been something that I really, really glad I did.
But I think it says a lot when you've got those exams coming up and they're quite important, and the only thing you can think about is something else, right?
Yeah, it was. My tutor wasn't very happy with me after that particular Christmas break. But no, it was for me. Yeah, as I say, I think I was quite lucky in that I had the chance to sort of take the time and think about it, and do loads of research. We all had so much time. Well, I was lucky enough to not be having to go into work all the time, but. Yeah, I just had so much time to actually just sort of fully get into it. I even look at the negative things. Like I was saying, I almost read myself that stat all the time just to try and dissuade myself, just to test to see how much I actually wanted to do this, just to see if it was a phase. But I don't think so. But we'll see.
Yeah, I found that really interesting that you even consider I just need to test out here. Like my mum always says to me, oh, you go through phases or whatever. But the fact that you were genuinely considering this as like something that's love, and you still had to kind of double check yourself, like, do I actually really want to do this? But I guess that moment that you set down the whole path less chosen, as we call it, is the moment you went into drama school, right? And then I'm really interested to know, like, a load of people that go down that route, I guess, do drama school at some point. But what is that experience like? And during that time, are you just saying yes to kind of every kind of acting opportunity, anything in that space? And how do you even go about it? I know you mentioned about, like, you got an agent at some point. It'd be really interesting to hear a little bit more about that as well.
Well, for me, again, I don't know if I was a bit of an interesting case, but it was a real learning curve coming from like such a sciencey background where everything is so black and white, it's right or wrong, to then go in and also something where I was doing it at I was up in Leeds and I was going in before COVID sort of 10-12 hours a week, maybe 15 hours a week, and then COVID obviously, and then straight into drama school where you're in 8 till 6 most days. Often you've got stuff that needs like working on with other people in there. So it was really the first month was like, it was just like a proper whirlwind. So much stuff to get used to. Just so many lines to learn all the time and stuff like that. And you've got like 3 or 4 different projects going on at once as well. It was, but that first month and then the first term up to Christmas was kind of, I found that a bit more of an adjustment phase and sort of getting used to it. And I think it was sort of Christmas till sort of March time where I started to actually like develop a little bit, which is really nice because it was the first time in so long that I felt like I was actually, you know, developing in a direction that I actually wanted to go. But it was definitely interesting in terms of the people as well. So it was obviously a very different demographic and very different cohort to what I had in Leeds doing pharmacology, and going from the labs there to then suddenly being. So I mean, some of the stuff. There's particular moments where I just sort of look back and go like, what fuck was that? What was going on that day? Animal studies springs to mind. It's a ridiculous thing. We had one moment where I was just I looked around and I was like, I was pretending to be a Komodo dragon on the floor. My mate is like climbing up the wall, pretending to be a monkey making monkey sounds. There's someone in the corner like just making a call from some sort of eagle. It's like there was some real bits like that where you're just like, what the fuck is going on?
That's
but
class.
At the same time, like you do learn like quite a lot from that sort of thing, and I'm glad they left that bit towards the end though, because that would have been a bit of a steep learning curve at the start if they put that right up front. But
wow.
Yeah, I mean it was great. It was a lot to get used to. And then towards the end, it sort of gets a bit more. First bit was kind of, I only did a year, so I didn't have too much time. But the first bit was very much more just sort of like, you know, sounds pretentious, but sort of finding your voice as an actor and all that. Still don't really know what that means. But then into the second half is much more sort of getting you ready for the industry. So you have what most, if not all, drama schools do is like a showcase at some point where they invite a bunch of agents in. So I was lucky actually. We did ours in Leicester Square in the Arts Theatre in Leicester Square, which was like a terrifying day. It really feels like your world is going to end if you don't get an agent on that day. I had to sort of keep reminding myself to just sort of actually enjoy it as well. Like it's performing on a West End stage. It's really exciting. And obviously I did leave without an agent there, so like it did feel like your world was ending, but there's other chances. And then I had like my final show at the end, which was I guess less important with agents and stuff like that and signing with an agent, but that was kind of like, that was a lot of fun as well. Much like bigger show. The showcase is a bit more sort of like you have like 2 of you that do it together because it's kind of trying to show off your like skills and that, but the last one is much more of like a complete show. So that was a nice way to finish. And then I left drama school without an agent, which does feel like your world is ending a little bit. But I was lucky after probably about a month after graduating, I just came across someone on Twitter or X whatever, and sort of got a meeting with her and sent over my material and stuff like that, my headshots. Didn't really have any show reel at that point. And she was happy to take me on. She obviously had done a lot with new actors who didn't have much experience. But yeah, I won't say any names because I don't want to be too incriminating. But it just ended up not being a sort of partnership that worked. I then got another agent probably about a month after I left her, and then he disappeared. Not quite sure what happened with him. And then January this year, I signed with my current agent, which is going really well actually. It's a difficult thing finding an agent that sort of works with you personally, and that is obviously working hard for you as well. But yeah, they definitely are at the minute, which is nice.
Yeah, it's really interesting because obviously I come from a point of view where I spent 3 years on the football agency side of things, and I know the kind of value that they bring. But I think for people listening, especially given the kind of turbulence that you went through, hopping from a couple of agents, trying to find that right working relationship, it's interesting to know, firstly, are they an absolute necessity? Because I imagine it's a little bit daunting. You said there, it's the end of the world if you don't get an agent. But at the end of the day, you're putting your career into the hands of somebody else, really. So are they a total necessity? And then secondly, how do you find that right partnership? How do you make sure that you're working with the right person that's better than you just going and representing yourself, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, so I left drama school without an agent, and it did feel like the end of the world, definitely. But there's a lot of things you can do yourself. There's sort of slightly more amateur casting platforms. One's called Backstage, one's called Mandy. There's casting callback as well, so that you can do a lot of work yourself. Having said that, you are slightly limited to the sort of extent that you can actually get the slightly more professional stuff. I mean, there's definitely some more professional stuff you can get on there yourself, but it's much more difficult to get the access to it. But again, a lot of the stuff that I did out of drama school was unpaid, and it was all student stuff. But it was still really, really useful to do that, because it was if nothing else, from a showreel perspective, it meant I actually had some really good material that I could use. But it just gives you a bit of experience on set as well. It's just even though they're small student sets and they're not as professional as they could be, you still get a lot of experience just being in front of camera, a lot of confidence that comes from that, definitely. But in terms of the right partnership, it's been difficult for me. I've had three agents in 3 years, and that's not something that a lot of my friends have. I don't know if I've had a particularly turbulent start to my career, or that's normal. I'm not sure, but it's about finding someone who you think understands you and where you are in your point of your career, that you're not scared to pick up the phone to. That was definitely the case with my first agent. I didn't feel like I could actually ask them questions about auditions and stuff like that. So it's about finding someone that you've got an open, honest dialogue with, definitely. Just because it's a very difficult industry to navigate, and if it's something that you feel like you're doing on your own, that's going to make it a lot harder for you to get out there and get your first role, definitely.
Yeah, it's a fascinating insight to have a world where it's someone who should be on your side, but at the same time, you're not really sure whether to bother or not. I can imagine that relationship's super hard. So if you're going through that and trying to either use an agent or use yourself to get auditions, how does that process work?
Yeah, so as I say, you've got the slightly less professional platforms, but generally what will happen is your agent will use a spotlight platform. Basically, it's called Spotlight, and all the more professional jobs are loaded onto there. It's almost like Indeed for actors, basically, and you have your own profile on there. You've got your headshots, you've got your experience, you've got your showreel and stuff like that as well. So generally, once you have your agent, that they will submit you for stuff, and then if the casting director that's casting that film or that play or that TV show wants to bring you in, and then they'll ask for an audition. And since COVID, it's definitely been more self-tapes, which in a lot of ways is really, really good. It means that it decreases your dependency on living in London. Definitely means that people can live elsewhere, and it doesn't have to be quite as necessary for you to live in London, and decreases the costs for travelling to auditions and stuff. But it also means that you can audition for loads more. So if it doesn't take you that time, it means you can you can do a couple of tapes in a day if you're lucky to have them. And then usually after that, the stage after that will be they'll get you in for in person. So that's it looks a little bit more like a classic audition that you might expect. For me, I mean, it depends on who you are. I know a lot of people prefer self tapes because you can have a look at different takes of it. You can have as many takes as you want. But for me, I just prefer being in the room, just because I think it gives you a little bit of it gives you a little bit of nervousness that sort of gives you a bit of energy when you're coming in, and it just sort of helps you get energized a little bit as well. And to be honest, it can be quite fun as well. This thing I find taping in my room quite difficult, especially when it's like I've got sirens going off outside. So yeah, I think actually getting in there and it feels a little bit more like you're on stage, a little bit more like a live performance, which I think is what I quite like about it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I'm sure everyone listening, including Jamie and I, have no idea what an audition even looks like. Give us an insight as to what it's like to walk in to try and impress someone to get an acting place.
Yeah, it's a really difficult one. I think a lot of you always want to go in and you think, oh, what will they want? What are they looking for? But actually, I think once you realise that you can't really do that, you have no idea what they're looking for. You don't actually know that much about the part. They rarely give you much information at all. I think you've got to go in there and sort of see it as an opportunity to just show what you can do. It's not necessarily what that role actually might be in the casting director's eyes. But you've got to see it more like an opportunity. I think as soon as you realise that it's so much based on luck. It's do I have the right hair colour? Am I the right height? It's as soon as you kind of take that pressure off yourself, I think that's quite a big step for me. Anyway, it was quite a big step for me. It's obviously you want to go in there and sort of impress and everything like that, but that's a natural thing to want to do. But I think it's almost impossible to do that because you very rarely have any idea what they're looking for. Which it sounds like it's almost not a very helpful thing to say, but it at least allows you to take a bit of ownership in going in and sort of just trying to do your best and doing what you can do, rather than trying to sort of fit a mould of what you think they might be looking for.
Yeah, no, I love that. And very quickly before we slightly move on, just like take us inside your mind. Do you still get nervous, or is it like one of those things where like you stood behind the stage, it's like it's just another day now, and then you go out and just do whatever you have to do that you've prepared, and then that's it done?
I mean, I definitely still get nervous. I mean, I think it's a bit different with like live performance, and I'll still get really nervous with that. And it's usually fine once you get on and say your first line. It's pretty terrifying up to that point. As soon as you get on, you're like, oh yeah, I've been doing this for weeks. I know I can do it. And it's quite hard to describe it as a feeling, really. But it's I think for me, one of the main things that I really like is it's being part of that team. Definitely, sort of you're working together on a project. You're working together with people that have the same interests as you, and you're feeling really passionate towards it. It's almost like so I'd equate it to like playing in a sports team or something like that. It's if you're doing really well as a sports team and you're preparing for like a cup final or something like that, you get a bit of like tunnel vision with it, and it's quite difficult to see outside of what you're doing. I've always really liked that. I think it's sort of being completely obsessed with one thing for a shorter period of time. And definitely when I was in shows at uni, I think my work probably suffered a little bit as a result of that, but I was fine with that, to be honest. I think that's the main thing for me. It's as much about the overall process and sort of building something together as the feeling when you're actually doing it as well.
Made it a really relatable point there, particularly for someone I was so ignorant, like to compare it to like the feeling of being in a sports team, right? Now like I'm kind of seeing like where it is, and like I can get the enjoyment you get for it. So I think that's really good. Then to slightly move away from it, I think one of the best things that we also picked up on from when we spoke previously before we did this is the fact that you said like it's really important when you're starting out, because it's so cutthroat, because it's so difficult. You're always searching for that next role, right? there's actually really important to keep yourself really open-minded and limitless to every other opportunity that might be in that entertainment space still. So you're still getting to work in the world that you live, the world that you love, but it doesn't mean that you're just relying purely on the acting side. So I think that's a really important message that's probably worth sharing for anyone that is looking to go down this kind of route. What is it exactly that you've done to keep open-minded and create opportunities elsewhere?
I've been looking more at the film production side of things as well, so moving behind the camera, and I've been lucky at just sort of people I've met have been looking for other roles. So I started looking at being a camera assistant, and I've been on camera assistant on 2 separate short films now, actually, which has been really, really interesting. It's not something I ever thought I would do or be interested in, and I still don't really know much about cameras, to be honest. So it's there's bits that I can do better than others, but it's just been something that's come my way, and I've tried not to really think too much about it. I've gone with it, and that's actually been so interesting. And I've got, I think as of today, I think I might have one more in the works in January as well. So there's sort of it's snowballing a little bit. I'm getting a bit of momentum with it, which is nice. Not to say that I'm wanting to do acting any less. It's just I seem to be getting a little bit more momentum with this side of things now. So that's one of the things I'd say in general with the world is there's so much luck in it, and there's so much like who you know and being in the right place at the right time, that when something does happen, even if it's not in the direction that you thought, I wouldn't necessarily think too hard into it about whether this is the path you want to go down. Just give it a go, see if it's where you want to end up, because it might end up that you actually really like that, and it's where you find a lot more enjoyment than you ever thought.
And then just to cap off, I would love to hear what's your dream. What's the 2%? Where are you going to get employed? Where do you want to be in 5 years' time?
The answer to that would have probably changed within the last sort of couple of months. Really, it's I've still got the same aspirations that I did when I came out of drama school. Of I'd love to work at the National Theatre. I'd love to be in a couple of maybe feature films as an actor. But now I think I would like to be a bit more varied than that, definitely. Because as I say, the film production side of things does seem to be moving a little bit faster than the acting thing. So I think if I'm in a position where I can have a bit of variety, that would be really, really nice. So definitely, across acting, then film production as well. But actually, more specifically, I mean, I'm in the early processes of developing a short film as well. So if that's something that could happen at some point as well, that would be amazing as well. But to be honest, I'm trying not to think too far ahead. To be honest, I'm trying to focus on the next few months and seeing where that takes me, and then maybe I'll have a different idea entirely in a couple of months' time.
No, I think it's so important. Like, you've still got that really high ambition, but then you've also become multifaceted, so there's loads of different opportunities, right? Which I think is great and really important for what we like to share on here as well. So then I'll finish off just with the final question, which I shared to you before. So if you were to go back, and I think the kind of timescale I'd like to put on it is when you were still in your science degree, and like kind of checking yourself, thinking, am I really about to make this step into drama school? Let's go back to that time. And then since then, what is one thing you would definitely have done the same, one thing you'd have done differently, and then one thing you'd have told yourself back then to motivate yourself?
I think, the main thing I'd say that I'm glad I did and I would do again is just getting out and seeing as much theatre, as much film, as much TV, and even like radio as much as you can. Just trying to sort of diversify what you're exposed to. Just because it helps you sort of develop an opinion, it helps you develop an idea of what you might want to be involved in. And take advantage of the sort of schemes for young people. So when I was starting out, I was lucky that I was under 25, and there's a lot of schemes, like accessibility schemes, that means you can go and watch theatre for cheap. So like things like National Theatre have I think it's 25 and under. You can get tickets for £5, and they're great seats as well. And it means I saw loads more than I would have done otherwise, because the National Theatre is not always the most financially accessible place in London. There's things like BFI do £3 tickets for the under 25s. There's other theatres like the Almeida and the Royal Court. So I think just while I was performing, that's what. While I was at drama school, that was what I was trying to do as much as I could, just to get out to sea as much as you can. But it just allows you to sort of shape yourself and shape the kind of thing that you want to perform in, that you want to be part of, but then at the same time, it also helped me realise that I was a bit more into film than theatre. So I came out of drama school thinking definitely sort of 80% theatre. That was what I wanted to focus on, and the more I've gone and watched film and got more interested in the film production side of things, I've realised that actually I think that's where my passion lies, and that's where I am definitely prioritising at the minute as well. So it's just allows you to sort of figure a few things out that way as well. I would say, don't limit yourself to one thing. Actually, is what I'd say, because I think the thing with the acting world is it's so difficult to get into. It's notoriously difficult once you're there to stay in as well. So it feels like if you're not 100% committed and 100% on board the entire time, then it's not going to happen for you. And that was a mentality that I was definitely sort of consumed by at times. And it can be great, and it means you're like completely 100% committed, and you can have tunnel vision with that sort of thing. And that is great. But at the same time, for me, I think what happened is that I was shutting myself off to other interests and other sort of avenues of employment, and even in like the film production side of things. Like I'd never even thought about working behind the camera. Until an opportunity came my way, and I just sort of ran with it, and then here we are. I'm looking more towards that now. So it's don't ignore your other interests. Just try some other things out. See if that piques your interest as well. Because as I say, now I've done that, I think I'm more leaning towards working behind the camera, and I now don't see that as a bad thing. There was definitely a time when I would have felt guilty for thinking that, because I was sort of thinking, I should be committed the whole time, otherwise it's not going to happen for me. So, I try and work quite hard on your attitude towards working as an actor, because it's so difficult. Try. I myself have worked really hard on just feeling less guilty about thinking about other things, just understanding that I feel a certain way about the industry at that certain time, and that's not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. It's just how I feel. And then the last thing I say to motivate myself, it's obviously a very unpredictable industry. Things can change really fast. So 1 week you can go from feeling quite down about it and feel like you're not really going anywhere, to then the next week you get a big audition, and you're suddenly like, oh, actually, no, I can see myself doing that. We're making progress here. I'm getting a bit of momentum. So much can change in such a short amount of time, and so much of that is out of your hands, which can be a bit daunting. But I think as soon as you, again, it's a similar sort of thing to the auditions. As soon as you realise that so much of it is out of your hands, you can kind of take ownership of it a little bit, and just sort of focus on where you are at that point in time, and those sudden changes can come really, really quickly. So use that as a way to motivate yourself and go, like, just keep going. Like, next week could be the week after could be the week, might not, but it could be as well. So that's the thing. And a lot of casting directors that I've spoken with on sort of workshops and stuff like that, they also start seeing getting the audition as a win. I think that's the thing. Rather than saying, oh, I got the audition, I didn't get it, feeling like that's a bit of a failure, just look at it as a little mini win. And you've got in front of a casting director, you've got that person's seen you. You never know what they might be casting in the future. So it's just keeping a wide lens on it is what I'd say, and just remembering that things can change really fast.
I love it, mate. So good to hear, and also like to hear your openness and your enthusiasm despite like a few setbacks, and despite having to go from a lab to being a Komodo dragon. It's always funny to hear all the journey. I think honestly amazing and so inspirational. I think for people who are, with the greatest respect, you're not someone who's a high flyer yet, but I know you will be. But at some point, it's great to hear your kind of 0 to 1 story. And so thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I know there will be budding actors and actresses listening to this who have gained a massive inspiration from it. So appreciate your time.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, some really, really good messages from Harry there. I mean, it's a world that you and I know nothing about, and it was really interesting just to hear him talk about it and give us some insight into how that world works. I think also what was really good, and you touched on it there when you were wrapping up, is like he shared it really honestly and gave like some really real messages. And one of them was, which is my first key takeaway, is the fact that especially in an industry like drama, like acting, like entertainment, whatever space you want to call it, with how cutthroat it is and how difficult it is to actually make a living and make it to the big guys that you see on like the Hollywood A-listers, right? You actually have to make sure that you're not limiting yourself, and that definitely does not mean that you're like venturing away from your path less chosen. A lot of people always say like, I'll give it 100% and like it might work out for you. He's actually said no, you can still give it 100% whilst doing bits on the side that are still in the same space, which means you gain more and more experience. You never know who you're going to meet. It makes you much more multifaceted and rounded, both as a person and also in that career. And that's a really, really important message now, because even if it doesn't work out how he wants it to be in his 5-year plan and longer, he has still got all of this great experience, which means he's going to be successful in that space, and he's never going to have to go back to the science labs, for example. I can never see him going back there, because he's built himself up as this in this world, and that's going to set him up quite nicely. So I thought being multifaceted and actually not limiting yourself was a really good and honest message in such a difficult world.
Absolutely spot on, and I think very interesting that like you've done that. I'm discovering that now with like the whole kind of creator influencer space. Like, again, you have to do both, and I think spot on takeaway that is being a well-rounded within an industry. Very cool. I love that. And from me, it's like my big takeaway, and I mentioned it right at the end there, is I love how like genuinely positive and enthusiastic he was. Like you could objectively look at where he is in his career right now and say like he's kind of eating the shit, and he's definitely like struggling. But my takeaway from that is he's kind of being positive, and he knows where he wants to be, as you mentioned, and that really helps him to kind of just ground himself and just be open to new experiences. I think you've got to be in careers for long games and in industry for long games, and he's managing to stay in a really good positive like form of self, which is key when you're having to travel and get rejected and do parts that you may not want to do. So yeah, that was kind of pretty inspirational actually to listen to from my perspective.
No, I agree. I mean, not everyone can be Zac Efron, like teenage musical sensation and all of that, right? That's a one in a million billion that get to be in that position. And actually the reality is there's a lot of people out there trying to make it up the rungs of the acting ladder, and to be 25 and being in positions where you're getting auditions, etc., still means you're on that journey. So absolutely agree. And the final one I wanted to point out as my third takeaway was something that I could really relate to, because I remember like going through stages and phases, as he referred to them, as when I was like going through like teenage years. Like there was a point where I wanted to be a vet, there was a point where I wanted to be in the army and like stuff like this. And he said, and he kind of gave permission for you to like actually question yourself. Like, is this just a phase? It's okay to question yourself and be like, is it worth it? And if you can ask that question to yourself and say, am I just going through a phase, or do I really, really want to do this? Which was such an important question for him when he was considering giving up a really good science degree to go down and pursue this. It's actually absolutely fine for you to do that. And if the answer is like an unequivocal yes, then you're doing the right thing. You're actually pursuing something that is worth doing. And I imagine you can probably relate to the same thing, right? When you had to question yourself, is this a phase, or do I actually just want to go down and do something that I'm really going to love? And you've gone and done it. So I imagine you can echo that message from him as well, right?
Yeah, I think it's spot on, because you have these shiny objects everywhere, which is like, oh, do I want to do this? Do I want to do this? And you can almost worry that you're going to be jumping from career to career. But yeah, I think he perfectly summed up the way that actually he had really thought about it. And that story he told where he was talking about the exams and all he could think about was something else. Like, I highlighted it in the episode, it really echoed with me, and I'm sure you had the same when you were at uni. Like, if you really, really can't get your mind off something for an extended period of time, I think it's a pretty good test on that. So yeah, spot on, mate. Really love that. So to sum up those 3 takeaways, we've got: be rounded in your industry and don't necessarily like be snobby about only doing the one thing that you are focused on. Being positive and just being genuinely optimistic about things is going to really help you, especially in a hard industry like this. And then questioning, is it a phase, and being like really evaluative whether that is true or not, but also being like really, really like pushing it once you know that you're actually not for a phase and this is something that you're passionate about.
100%, yeah, nicely summed up. No, really good episode. It was good to chat to Harry again. I can't remember the last time I chatted to him, must have been like 4 or 5 years ago, but to hear what he's up to now was great, and I appreciate him coming on. So you can check out all of his stuff. We'll make sure we drop it into the caption for the podcast. And yeah, he's shared some really good messages there for people that want to go into that kind of space, and hopefully we'll have more interesting guests coming up. So thanks for listening.
Please do just drop a little rating on the podcast if you do have the chance. We'd really appreciate it, and it does really, really help our algorithm on Spotify, which I know nothing about, but apparently exists. So it'd be very, very helpful if you could do that. Thank you very much, and catch you next week.